Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, friends and neighbors, please welcome to Rock Jock Talk, Mr. Robert Ford. Fourth season as play-by-play announcer of the Houston Astros. Has it been 4 years already?
This is year number 4, that's right.
First and foremost, besides pleasantries, how's your lovely daughter doing?
She's doing great. She's 5 going on 25, but that's okay.
And are you glad that lunatic mayor from Toronto, who was your namesake, is finally dead?
Well, once I got past the initial, after he passed, all these people tweeting me and saying, "Hey, I thought you were dead." It's I don't know what's worse, people thinking you're dead or people thinking you smoke crack. But I am alive and I do not smoke crack. So there you go. Those are the fundamental differences between me and the mayor of Toronto.
Well, I'm glad you're alive, and I'm glad you're back in the Pacific Northwest. Robert was the play-by-play announcer back when, in arguably one of the darkest summers in baseball history in the Yakima Valley, the 2002 Yakima Bears. Robert, refresh my memory. Was that the 0 for August year?
Yeah, well, they started off by losing their first 22 games in the month of August. And when you play a 76-game schedule and lose 22 in a row, playoffs probably aren't in your future.
Well, let's fast forward. Last year, as the play-by-play guy for the Houston Astros, if I'm not mistaken, was the first time you ever got to call a postseason game. Is that correct?
Yeah, at any level, majors or minors. It was my 14th year in baseball. And, what was cool about it for me, obviously, the playoffs are great regardless. But, the Astros started off in the wild card game in New York against the Yankees, about 20 minutes from where I grew up in the Bronx. So that made it even that much more special.
And let's connect the dots between the big leagues in Houston and minor league ball here in Yakima. In between, you had a stop in Kansas City and did Royals radio for a while. And then no sooner do you get the call to the show, but then the Royals, who had suffered mightily for decades, they make it to the World Series. Were you mad? Were you glad? Was it bittersweet?
No, I was happy for them. I really enjoyed my time in Kansas City, but I was doing pre and post. I wasn't doing play-by-play, and that's what I really wanted to do. So, as happy as I was for the people in Kansas City, there wasn't this feeling like, man, I wish I was still there. But I love going back there. Great to see the support the Royals get now. I can't say that I predicted a world championship this past year and 2 straight World Series appearances, but, you could see the talent coming. I was in Kansas City when Mike Moustakas and Eric Hosmer and then Lorenzo Cain and all those guys got to the big leagues with the Astros, or with the Royals. And, they made that trade getting Cain and Alcides Escobar from Milwaukee and the Zach Greinke deal. I was there when all of that happened. It was kind of neat to just see it come to fruition, even if I was watching from afar.
And similar situation you find yourself in now. We're talking with Robert Ford, Houston Astros radio play-by-play man. Same thing with the Astros, a bunch of young talent that maybe ripened faster than even the most expert analyzer would see, but things are really looking up for Houston now.
Yeah, certainly. Not off to a great start so far this year, but, obviously getting guys like George Springer and Carlos Correa up to the big leagues. There's just a lot of talented young players on this ball club, and of course, Jose Altuve, he's still a young player. He's a 3-time All-Star, but it's easy to forget that Altuve is still only 25 years old. He doesn't turn 26 until next month. So I think just seeing all this young talent here and, a mixture of some veteran guys as well, including the former Mariner, Doug Fister, who's going to pitch today. And I think this team has a really bright future.
Well, you're leading me into that. Doug Fister against Taijuan Walker tonight. 2 guys that have absolutely been brutal, not just on the American League, but Seattle in particular. Dallas Keuchel and Colin McHugh also slated to pitch. How do you see heading into this 3-game series to start the week? How do you see this playing out?
Well, I think for the Astros, it's really simple. It comes down to starting pitching. They have not been getting good starting pitching, and that's the biggest reason why they're 6-13 right now. In the last 8 games, the starters have an ERA of over 6. I think the biggest thing is they've allowed runs in either the first or second inning in 7 of their last 8 games, including their loss last night to the Boston Red Sox. So I think that's something that they need to clean up. They need to get off to better starts in games, and it begins with starting pitching. They've had some issues sitting with runners in scoring position, but you look at the offensive numbers. The Astros have had we're 3 weeks into the season, and the Astros have had an American League Player of the Week each week.
Wow.
So I don't think the offense is the problem. Colby Rasmus won it this past week. Tyler White shared it. Mark Trumbo 2 weeks ago, and the first week of the season it was Altuve. So I flip-flopped that. White won it the first week of the season, and Altuve won it the second week. I think the offense is going to be fine. I think the biggest question is the starting pitching, and that needs to get better. If that happens, I think this series will go well for the Astros, and the season will go well for the Astros.
Yeah, how do you see? You can be as objective or as biased as you'd like to be. When the chips are all done and 162 have been played, how do you see both the Astros and the Mariners stacking up?
Well, I feel like the Astros and the Rangers are the 2 best teams in the West, in the AL West, and I really do think it's going to come down to one of them. I certainly could see Seattle or Anaheim or Oakland maybe making a push, but I still think those are the 2 best teams in the division. As for the Mariners, I like the acquisition of Adam Lind for the Mariners, and obviously you have a formidable middle portion of the order with Lind and Cano and Kyle Seager and Nelson Cruz. But my biggest question with the Mariners is who's going to get on base for those guys?
Mm-hmm.
And who are those guys going to be driving in? Because I'm not too crazy about the rest of the guys in that lineup in terms of being consistent offensive performers. So I think that's going to be an issue for the Mariners. Although I do like obviously King Felix and Iwakuma at the top of your rotation. That's pretty good. Taijuan Walker's off to a good start. He has as much talent as anybody. If he continues to perform well, that gives you a formidable top three. I like the rotation. I see the bullpen's gotten off to a really good start, but I still think that it's going to be either the Astros or the Rangers in the division.
Now, back to Robert Ford, season 4 in the big leagues. What has you've been to every ballpark, I'm sure, virtually in the major leagues, certainly in the American League. Biggest surprise after one season under your belt, and now things are becoming, I'm assuming, a little more routine. What was the biggest surprise going to the big leagues as a broadcaster?
I don't know if there was anything that was necessarily surprising, and I think it helped that I covered the Royals for 4 years before doing this, even though I didn't travel with the team and didn't do play-by-play. I was around the big league atmosphere. I was at all the Royals home games, so I got some exposure to that. So I think I had a pretty good idea of what to expect. I think the biggest thing for me was just getting a chance to call Major League Baseball every single day and just getting better. I think the biggest thing, I wouldn't say it's a surprise, I think the biggest thing you have to get used to is just the wealth of information.
Right.
Just trying to figure out how to sift through it, because when you're in the minor leagues, and it doesn't really matter what level of the minor leagues you're at, it gets better as you move up, but it's still hard to get information sometimes, whether you talk about information on different teams, whether you talk about information on players in your team, players in other teams. But now that's not really an issue. There's so much information that it's a matter of sifting through it and figuring out what you need and what maybe you don't need, whereas in the minors, it's you just take whatever you can get information-wise.
Right.
So I think that's probably the biggest difference, certainly for me, from being in the minor leagues for 7 years to getting a chance to call Major League games.
What cities are your most favorite to go to? What food on the road have you discovered in each one of these cities? And I'm not obviously talking, press box spreads or anything like that, but as you get to kind of stretch your legs and get to see some of the sights and the different cultures of each town, what are some of your favorite things around the American League?
Well, Seattle's one of my favorite cities. I love that we come here 3 times a year. There's always good seafood here. There's always good Asian food here. I just love coming to Seattle. It's one of my favorite cities, and that was true even before I took this job. I've always loved Seattle. I'm a big fan of Boston as well. Historical city, and I love New England clam chowder. And you can't have bad New England clam chowder in Boston, so that's fun. I'm from New York originally. That's home, so New York is always near the top of the list for me. I always try to make sure I have some good cheesecake and maybe some pastrami and corned beef when I'm in New York as well. And Chicago's a great city as well. That's one that I wish we got to go to more than once a year. Just a great town. I have some really good friends there as well, which helps make it that much better. I really like the downtown area of Chicago. And I like the fact that you have the L there. It's really easy to get around. Obviously you do the deep dish pizza in Chicago. They have really good ethnic food there as well. I'd probably say those are. There really aren't too many bad cities. You talk about the major leagues, but I'd say those are probably my favorites.
And as a broadcaster, what press areas do you find, at least for you, each place is going to have different sight lines and things like that. Where do you like to call a game from? Ambiance maybe aside, but just more for you. Where do you like calling games on the road?
Well, I like Seattle. I like the booth here. It's a good-sized booth. It's a good sight line. You're not too high. I like the booth in Anaheim as well. It's kind of open. It's always nice weather in Southern California, and so it's very comfortable. And sometimes it gets a little cool in the evening there, and they have this really neat overhead heater that helps you keep you warm out there. So that's pretty cool. Obviously doing games at Yankee Stadium and Fenway Park, a big thrill for me. Yankee Stadium is just so modern, and just the way the fans get into it, and Fenway Park, it's so historic. But they've actually done a good job of keeping it up to date when it comes to the press box and everything. Even though I think the smut on the windows there probably dates back to Carl Yastrzemski's era at Fenway, it's still a pretty good place to call a game. And then you're right. Everything is just right on top of the action. We talk about the fans, the podcast booth. So those places are pretty cool.
Well, Robert, this is your first, like you said, of 3 trips back here to the Pacific Northwest. I'm so glad to get to talk to you. I listen to your voice on my MLB Premium subscription from time to time, and you're sounding fantastic. You do a great job for the Astros. We're going to get you back up here right after the All-Star game in July, and then again mid-September, I think. So I hope you'll be amenable to staying in touch with us.
Yeah, absolutely. Always good to hear from you, Todd.
And hey, any advice for young broadcasters? It's a long road to hoe, and your testament that it can be done, and the dues have to be paid. But is there a piece of inspirational advice you could give to anybody out there that hasn't has that same dream that you had?
I think the biggest thing is you want to just try and continue to get better, continue to get reps, however you can do that. I got the job in Yakima based off the demo tape I made of games I called from the stands at Yankee Stadium and Shea Stadium, and that got me my first job. So, that could happen for anybody. If you want to do baseball, go out and do baseball, or whatever sport you want to do, go out and do that sport. Find a way to get yourself on the air, even if it's not necessarily on the air like I did with the games in the stands, but just find a way to make tapes and just to continue to get better. Always seek feedback from people who can help you. You always want to get some good constructive criticism to find out how you can get better. But you also have to understand, too, once you get to a certain level, there are a lot of really good broadcasters who will never call Major League games, and it's not their fault.
Right.
There are only a handful of these jobs in the world, and people who get these jobs must try and stay in them for a long time. So, I think if you get to a point in your career where you're discouraged, you're not in the big leagues, you have to keep in mind there are a lot of good broadcasters who aren't. And it takes talent, but it also takes a little bit of luck.
Robert, again, so good to hear from you, man. And you just sound fantastic. I hope you have a tremendous season. I hope you get some more playoff games this year. And gosh, in a perfect world for me, maybe I'd get to see you in October for some playoff action up at Safeco.
All right. Good talking with you, Tom.